Hi, we are the Muses, and this is Sarah Schottler. We would like to present on the series of skills development and classroom learning. First, I would like to talk about human biological development. So in the great nature versus nurture debate, this form of development, biological, naturally corresponds with arguments for nature and the natural development of a child's impact on intelligence. Nature or biology plays a large role in the development of a child, but the research provided by Presley and McCormick also supports the effect of the environment on a student's natural, which is biological development. And we'll talk a little later. So here, let's review the foundations of neurological development. First of all, it starts in the womb, about 8 weeks after fertilization, so very early on. And then after birth, the development of the cerebral cortex begins, and that is responsible for complex human thought processes. And then 2 to 3 months after birth, the expectant synapses develop. These send signals in the nervous system that respond to typical environmental factors that almost everyone experiences. For example, the visual system is sensitive to light, so you'll know to shade your eyes if light is shining into it. Experience-dependent synapses is a little more important for our cause because it depends on the environment. So they develop from environmental stimulation and are formed at any time in an individual's life. For example, the learning experiences educators create. So, during the first 2 years of a child's life, the brain grows at a rapid rate. The physical growth of the brain can be affected by the environment because the brain is more or less plastic. It can be molded more or less depending on what environmental factors are provided. And we'll talk a little bit about environmental factors later. The frontal lobe also develops after birth, which is responsible for some short-term memory, motivation, and attention. Some initial indicators are if a child can find a hidden object out of 2 locations. So I have a marble under 2 cups, and the child can identify under which cup the marble is. So aside from these 2 predictable developments, there's about 13 growth spurts during early adulthood, 7 of which occur during the first 2 years of a child's life. The other growth spurts more or less fits and starts, and they're a little more random. The motor development occurs within the first 6 months of infancy and increases in capacity with age. Adolescent growth spurt is a change in height and weight of a child during their development. It varies for girls and boys, a little earlier for girls than boys. And then, of course, the time of puberty affects a child's ability to adjust. So girls who may experience early maturation could be a little more stressed and depressed as they are, as quoted from Presley and McCormick, potentially unprepared for the social pressures and experiences related to sexual maturity. On the other hand, boys may have a positive social impact when they mature early. So early intervention, so in early development, sometimes neurological development goes wrong. And one example of this is PKU babies. So these babies can't break down a very common chemical found in prepared food. PKU babies' intelligence may be impaired due to intervention, dietary restrictions, and these babies may have difficulty with short-term memory and self-control. So PKU, if it is not found until 3 years of age, profound retardation could be the outcome or is the outcome. So this neurological disorder in babies is really dependent on the environment that they are given to make sure that they can develop a normal intelligence. There are other dietary disorders that cause similar problems. So developmental disorders and disruptions in development. Disruptions are mainly due to environmental factors. So, for example, injury, disease, pollutants, etc. They can change the biology during development and could have long-term implications. Other environmental factors are hazards associated with food, so pesticides, perhaps water hazards, so lead in the water, and maybe secondhand smoke might affect the development of organs. Then, of course, there are teratogens that are environmental factors that affect the biological development and range of a person's intelligence during the development of this nervous system. So during pregnancy, one example of this is fetal alcohol syndrome. When a mother consumes alcohol during pregnancy, a child could develop this syndrome, and they might develop learning disorders because of it, and potentially they might have issues with mental retardation. So then other disruptions in the environmental factors are malnutrition, which can, of course, affect mental competency. Neurological injury can reduce mental competency. Premature birth can affect respiration, and it can cause hemorrhages. Some disorders, an example of a learning disorder that disrupts a child's reading capabilities is dyslexia, and this could either be due to environmental factors, so brain injury can potentially cause dyslexia, or there are other developmental issues that have no obvious cause. To learn about hereditary and environment, you'll need to know two terms, and that is genotype and phenotype. A genotype is the collection of genes we possess and are given by our parents, and a phenotype is the outcomes of these genes. Outside of environmental, biological, developmental issues, a child's heredity expressed in their genotype can affect their intelligence. The expression of intelligence depends on their phenotypes, how the genes a child is given are expressed. And this is largely dependent on the environment. If they're given high-quality environments, and a child's development can largely affect the reaction range of the child's genotype. So, for example, if a PKU baby is given the nutritional environment they need to eliminate the chemical they cannot break down, they will develop normal intelligence. If they are given a different environment that doesn't promote the nutrition that they need and the dietary restrictions that they need, they could develop extreme mental retardation. This also brings us back to experience-dependent synapses and the need for experiences that promote ongoing neurological development. Experience-dependent synapses is dependent on the environment and form throughout the child's life. So it's an ongoing neurological development. This is what we as educators and teachers create. We make these neurological connections through the experiences in our classroom. So what can we as teachers do? We can provide students with learning experiences necessary for expressing the best phenotype or best genetic outcome. We need to create learning experiences that help develop the experience-dependent synapses, and we need to pay special attention to the individual needs of the students. Student achievement can be tracked, and academic intervention can be implemented to support exceptional learners and learners with special needs to give them a high quality of environment. And human biological development gives us an insight as to how the biology of a child can affect their intellect, and how providing appropriate environment can nurture the desired biological outcome of a human being. So that is the nature and nurture. In addition to biological and environmental factors, what this applies to biological development is Piaget's stage theory. And Piaget came up with 4 stages of development: sensory, motor, pre-operational, concrete operational, and formal operational stage. And these stages are, according to Piaget, largely age-dependent, and they outline sort of the tasks a student can perform at their given age. So, for example, from birth to 2 years old, the sensory motor stage, what can they do? Motor sheen object performance, so they can work with objects and work with movement. Whereas someone in the formal operational stage in their teen years, they can plan ahead, they can also deal with hypothetical situations, which I guess would be possibilities. According to Piaget, not all children will make it to each of these phases. Each human can go through these at different times, and some children may not make it to the formal operational phase. Piagetian theory only describes the development of normally functioning children, as quoted in Presley McCormick. There are other factors that influence the progression in stages: biological maturation, experience, and social environment. So all of these can affect the stage or the rate at which a child develops through these stages. So how can we promote student potential and motivation according to these stages and with that information? Educators can design learning environments so that discovery via equilibrium would be likely. Create small groups throughout the classroom. This will address the students who mature through the stages differently, so they can work together and learn from each other. Student interests should be involved in the classroom to address learning. This can also increase motivation. If a student is interested in the subject and their individual interest is brought into the classroom, they're motivated to learn the subject. And keep the learning relevant to the students. That also applies to the interests of the students. It would be relevant, and also to keep their cultural backgrounds and their previous knowledge relevant in the classroom. So how can we create successful lesson plans according to this information? So we're going to first, of course, determine the developmental stage of our students according to Piaget's development 4 stages. Students should be active participants in their learning, so there should be activities that are appropriate for their stage that they can engage in while feeling comfortable. Make students aware of the conflicts and ways they should approach the conflicts. Keep these conflicts, of course, relevant for student interest, and encourage different ways of thinking. So Piaget in classroom, here's an overview of some of the activities one might do. So, for example, in sensory motor phase, you want to provide a sensory-rich environment, and an example of how you might do that is peekaboo. There's a lot of physical and visual stimulation going on there. Then there's, for example, the formal operational phase. They can explore hypothetical situations, and they can perform step-by-step tasks. So you also want to bring differences in student learning into the classroom. One example is cultural awareness. Students will certainly bring in different experiences, which is a mechanism of cognitive change. So you want to bring in those experiences and allow students to change them or build on their own personal experience according to the learning. Then you want to definitely pay attention to learning disabilities. Piagetian theory, however, only describes the development of normally functioning children, so it's a little bit limiting. Although many of the suggestions made for normally functioning children apply to the developmentally delayed children. So you just have to be aware of the individual needs of your students and be ready to modify your lesson on the spot. Some neo-Piagetian perspectives, it's definitely the Piagetian theory has evolved, especially looking at its application to the developmentally disabled. So current research shows alternative explanations for variations in developments within stages. The ability to engage in a certain stage also depends on the specific task of the classroom, the prior knowledge and experience of the student, the social interactions, and definitely the culture of the student. So the background, history, So here are some perspectives and criticisms to the Piagetian stage theory. We're going to look at Bobby Case theory of cognitive development. So Robbie Case argues that short-term or working memory is responsible for stage development rather than the progression of stages. So practicing skills requires less and less short-term memory. So it opens up the short-term memory for acquiring new information. So keep on practicing. Long-term memory becomes better organized with informational chunks as the student matures, and memory increases as a function of neurological maturation. So you certainly want to be aware of the memory capacity of your students. So Kohlberg's contribution to Piaget theory, he tackles the question, how can education add to the moral development of the child for the good of society? Kohlberg identifies a six-stage theory. This ranges from a child's development of morality, from punishment to legally oriented moral choices. And according to Kohlberg, the educator is a guide in developing morals and conscientious behaviors. There are additional perspectives, of course. There's Kurt Fisher's theories of cognitive development. And he argues that skills are learned in context instead of a stage-like progression. Skills are learned over a long period of time and build off of each other, instead of being confined to a specific age stage. And biological stages of progression can cause cognitive and behavioral changes with spurts of brain growth. So it gives more flexibility throughout the stages and the ages according to what a student can do. Carol Gillian's theory of moral development is a feminist approach. She argues that male and females are socialized differently, and females stress interpersonal relationships more than males, and females take responsibility for the well-beings of others. So they develop differently, men and women, boys and girls. So how does this apply to classroom learning, or how can you apply this knowledge to classroom learning? Well, the teacher needs to provide attainable learning goals appropriate for the stage and age of the students. So that can be according to their memory capacity, according to what they're capable of doing. The teacher additionally needs to pay attention to the individual student's learning needs, gender, cultural background, and interests. So really pay attention to every student, realize that their wiring is different according to everything they've experienced and everything going on. The teacher needs to limit the input according to the working memory capacity of the students. That takes us back to the first point. It needs to be an attainable goal, not too much for their working memory. And the teacher then needs to have an effective method of classroom management and clear disciplinary behavior policies. That's just standard. And of course, the developmental cycles, they build on each other with the simpler skills seen as the foundation for the next year of learning. And here's a lovely illustration. So there are three approaches or methods of education today that sort of encompasses all that knowledge about your students as individuals. The first is romanticism, belief that the child is naturally good, resulting in a free and permissive educational environment. So something like discovery learning, less guidance from the teacher. He is more there as a resource. The cultural transmission. This is more of a direct instruction, lecture, take notes style. Most common model in today's educational system is pretty passive. Progressivism leads to constructivist theories based on active participation in problem solving and critical thinking. So, constructivist approaches are constructing on one's knowledge. And let's take a look at some of these. Constructivist theories in the classroom are often open-ended in evaluation. Each student is unique with individual perceptions, so they bring their own individual experiences to the learning environment. It is often project-based learning for active engagement, collaboration with peers and society. It provides learning in real-world situations, so it really gives them a little more motivation to learn in context. Offer students more choices and relevant topics, fewer topics, more deeply explored. It certainly helps with short-term memory. And the teacher is a guide. There's a lot of blended learning in flipped classrooms, so it's sort of out of the ordinary, less direct instruction. So the conclusion, let's read this together. Educational theories are relevant to classroom management. No single theory fully addresses the variability of learning and human development. Teachers today should understand these different ideas and recognize their interconnectedness. Each contribute to a more complete understanding of the learning process. They offer important clues of ways to improve educational outcomes. Thank you. Our sources are The Wonderful Brain Rules, 12 Principles for Surviving and Thriving at Work, Home, and School, and then Child and Adolescent Development for Educators from Presley and McCormick. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this, and